Last year, an amateur archaeologist was walking through these woods when he came across a load of lumps and bumps, and they were very lumpy and bumpy. He was told that this site played a crucial role in the defence of this island during the Second World War, and he realised that it needed to be looked at before it was lost forever. So he talked to Time Team about it, and they said that no one has ever dug a site like this before, because although this is British soil, these defences aren't British. They're German, part of the vast complex of defences built by Hitler to turn Jersey into an island fortress. Oh, and by the way, that amateur archaeologist was me. So I'm going to be under quite a lot of pressure over the next few days. In the early summer of 1940, the Channel Islands became the only part of the British Isles to be invaded and occupied by the advancing forces of Hitler's Blitzkrieg. For the islanders, it was the beginning of 5 years of the cold reality of life under hostile occupying forces. And even now, 70 years later, the islands are littered with the remains of that occupation.
During the occupation period, 40 to 45, we're talking about some 65,000 plus mines being laid in the island and probably over 26,000 tonnes of other munitions.
And it means for the next 3 days, our archaeologists are going to have to be rather careful when it comes to any small finds they uncover.
This is a 75. If you happen to tap one with your trowel, I suggest you stop tapping it and basically make your way away from it.
So, are you still happy to go ahead with this?
I think I feel slightly more cautious about the whole thing.
So, with the briefing over, it's time to get our first trench in.
Now you say, don't hit it hard, and then the first thing you do is you go.
And it's essential we're vigilant, because our site at Les Gillettes is a heavily fortified German anti-aircraft battery that overlooked the airport and dominated the surrounding landscape. Now hidden under a canopy of trees, this rare wartime RAF reconnaissance photograph shows the site in its prime, and it suggests it once dripped with heavy artillery.
Looks like a weapons pit, doesn't it? And it's the right size to put one of the 20mm in rather than one of the big 88s, yeah.
OK.
But for me, it's a lot more than just learning about the position of flak guns. It's about the archaeology of the only successful invasion and occupation of Britain since 1066.
I mean, this was meant to be one of the open areas they thought we could look at, but I mean, it's just a non-starter.
Unfortunately, not everyone is quite so enthusiastic about my choice of site.
I don't know what we're going to do.
So, with geophysics somewhat kiboshed by the vegetation, we're going for the old-fashioned approach. Our first trench over a possible gun emplacement has gone in based on the aerial photograph and Stuart's surveying skills. And he's already given us a position for a second trench.
There's a whole series of structures here that look as if they're buildings associated with the emplacement that Phil's working on. And this might be where the crews look after the gun, as it were. This is where people might actually be living. We're not expecting anything big and concrete. It's not a bunker type of building. It might even be just a timber building.
The way you're talking, you've actually got very excited about this site.
I love it. It's like just wandering into woodland and suddenly finding all these things above ground.
But if you've got that aerial photograph, do we actually need to do a great deal of archaeology?
Well, we do, because this was taken in 1944. They could have put all sorts of other things here which wouldn't even be on this aerial photograph.
In spite of being only 70 years old, we haven't been able to find any written records for this site. They were probably destroyed by the Germans before they surrendered.
Wondered whether it was part of a field kitchen, but that's not going to work for filling it full of soup, is it? So
it looks too fragile for something like a gun mounting, doesn't it?
Doesn't it just?
Well, there's our first mystery on this site. We have 2 days left to find out what that is.
And people say, why do you bother digging it? You know what everything is.
But we have sorted out Trench 1.
Yeah. It's not just a bank that's thrown up to go round a gun.
As Phil's discovered that the defences built on this hillside were engineered to last.
What we seem to get is this inner stone-built revetment and then we've got this fine grain material pushed against the outside of it to make the actual bank.
I mean, that makes complete sense. You don't want enemy shell fire or bullets striking stones. So you put the soft stuff out there, and that will absorb the energy of incoming ammunition from the enemy.
So our first trench can confirm that this earthwork is a 20mm gun emplacement, and it was strategically placed to shoot down low-flying aircraft.
Phil's emplacement up on the top here on the highest point, that's a 20mm gun. That's designed to be quick moving. It's got a rapid rate of fire.
And as we know this shape is a 20mm gun, we can confidently say that all these features are also 20mm guns, which isn't a bad result for one day's digging. But as Stewart's discovered, they were just part of a sophisticated setup to defend the airfield and the island against Allied attack. It's the start of day 2 in Les Gillettes, Jersey.
Right, I think we've got another bullet there.
Oh, yeah.
And we're beginning to get used to finding ammunition in our trenches.
That's another one of these German 7.92 cases. It's the standard small arms ammunition.
It's not surprising, really, as we're trying to piece together the complex layout of this World War II German anti-aircraft battery. By the end of yesterday, we'd made our first breakthrough. And we now know what this earthwork was all about. It was the site of a 20mm anti-aircraft gun. So far, so good. But today, we're going after the big stuff. Because if the 20mm emplacements on this site were like the muskets of anti-aircraft warfare, then it's these massive enclosures housing 88mm guns that were the cannons.
That's what an 88mm looks like with its crew. It's got an 8-man crew. It sits on a big tripod. You need something about 12 metres wide. And this is an incredibly powerful gun. If we had a gun here, you see the contrails in the sky, people going on their holidays?
Yeah.
They're at 20,000 feet, thereabouts. This gun would bring that down. Wow. That's an incredible gun, is that?
So far, we've only been digging about a third of this battery. And Stewart feels it's about time to investigate another target at the other end of the site.
You know, from other flat batteries, you know what to expect. There's the guns, and then there has to be a fire and command control centre close to the guns, and sometimes have a shelter for the crew underneath, like a bunker or something like that. Not necessarily concrete, could be dug down into the rock or the earth.
Well, I mean, the results don't necessarily suggest concrete bunker, but certainly something that's going deep into the ground and appears to have collapsed and be full of rubble.
We need a trench across that anomaly, don't we? I mean, there's no question about it. Very, very interesting.
Well, we've already marked it.
Oh, using powers of prediction, that's fantastic.
That's hard ground, isn't it?
So we're opening a new trench over a potential bunker. And very quickly, it becomes clear there's something rather interesting deep down.
But it's red here. There's some tile.
All right, so tile is...
Oh, brick. Or something.
Your line 2.
And if we can work out what it is, it'll help us build a picture of this hillside 70 years ago, using all the cutting-edge technology we have at our fingertips.
This tray is stuff connected with the occupation. It doesn't look like much, but that's the fastener from one of the ammunition boxes that would have serviced the 20mm cannons.
This is the one that had us all intrigued yesterday. It seems to be like the replica of a medal.
Well, I had a word with one of the local collectors last night, and he produced this.
Oh,
this is a War Merit Badge, 2nd class, with swords. And I think they're obviously trying to make a little homemade version of that here.
I love the idea of a trenches gag, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I mean, are they sitting up here, awarding each other huge decorations? Oh, for you, Otto, Iron Cross 1st class.
And it's probably something conscripts posted a long way from home have done since the beginning of time. Back in Rackshaw's trench, a morning's industrial pruning has now revealed that we do have the site of an 88mm gun.
Can you see these metal bolts coming through here?
Oh, yeah.
I've also got this circular feature as well. I'm wondering whether this is actually the gun placement.
I think you're onto something there.
And it's becoming clear that the gun was at the centre of a substantial piece of engineering.
At the moment, what we've got uncovered is, what, about a third of it, something like that?
It's about a third, because you can see the bank coming down that side. It's actually really massive, and just it coming through there, so I think we are pretty much in the middle.
I reckon, then, what we need to do is try and extend this and get at least a half of it open. Then that gives us some understanding of how the whole thing would have been laid out.
Great, better carry on then.
Bit more digging.
Slowly but surely, we're getting a sense of the force once stationed here. In fact, it's turning out to be a rather enjoyable journey of discovery. And then we discover the last thing we need.
Ian, I think that's perhaps where we stop, because I think we've got some form of ordnance going on.
And this time, it's not a stray bullet.
Right here, right behind us.
It looks like a very real, very live artillery shell.
Hi, it's Faye here. Is anyone around to come and have a look at some potential ordnance in my trench, please?
We'll get someone over.
Brilliant, thank you. Not very happy about this. I don't want to get too close, actually, funnily enough. Strange.
It's the afternoon of day 2 at our German anti-aircraft gun emplacement in Jersey.
Share this with me.
And it looks like we've just found a very unwelcome reminder of what this site was all about.
Well, it's definitely the base of a shell case. It's almost certainly an 88. What I don't know at the moment is whether it's the actual case is alive and whether there's a shell at the end of it, which is the more hazardous part of the item.
The whole reason Faye's been digging this trench is to investigate some of the structures on this fortified hillside, because we're discovering that although the anti-aircraft guns were at the heart of this site, they didn't exist in isolation.
The communication cable comes from here.
And Phil's now uncovered evidence that the gun crews were being coordinated by central command units.
If we got the cables coming in here and actually skirting past, could they be coming to that 88 up there?
Well, that'd be most logical. There's nothing in between, is there?
And Stuart now believes he's found the location of one of these control centres.
We're looking at something sticking out to about this distance. At the moment, this, on the balance of evidence, is the best candidate we've seen for a command and control centre. It's the biggest complex on the site. It's central to all the anti-aircraft batteries and so on.
This would be a perfect target for a trench, except for one small detail: the best spuds in the world.
Shame it's under potatoes, eh?
So in this case, it's Jersey Royals 1, Time Team 0.
This material here might very well be propellant, so we are talking about quite a long case.
OK. And potentially then unfired or fired?
Definitely unfired.
Back at Faye's trench, we're now ready to lift our unwelcome find.
Oh, my gosh. OK, what's that?
It is 88, but it's what they call a drill round, and they would use it for practice and drill when they're firing the guns.
So it's not dangerous?
No.
Ah, that's a relief.
Beginning of day 3 here at Les Gillettes, my little forest deep in the heart of Jersey, where we're trying to piece together the story of a World War II German anti-aircraft battery. And although we've done pretty well, we've only managed to identify 4 features so far, which is a bit worrying because we've only got 1 day left, and I've got an awful lot of these cards still to put up. But the features we have identified, an ablution hut, a foxhole, and 20mm and 88mm gun emplacements, have allowed Stuart to start identifying similar features in the 1944 aerial photograph.
Another 88 emplacement here, and another 88 there.
And that, in turn, has given us other potential targets.
So you should have a rangefinder. It's like a pair of binoculars, but one lens is out there and one lens is out there to get the range of the aircraft as they come and send instructions to the big guns.
But we're also picking up other archaeological features that suggest that as the war progressed, this fortified hillside was redeveloped.
We've got a concrete crew shelter, but it's different to the other ones we see here because it's got an emplacement in front of it.
So our final trenches go in over these intriguing features around the perimeter of the site.
Ugh, filthy rubbish.
So, Faye, this looks like a big hole with a lot of demolition rubble pushed in the base of it.
Over on the other side of the site, Faye, having recovered from her shell shock, is trying to resolve the mysterious potential bunker.
So at the back there, we've got what looks like a dividing wall or something, and then we've got all these cables coming in as well.
And it was this trench that produced one of the weirdest looking finds I've seen in a long time. Yesterday afternoon, our entire dig ground to a halt for a bit when we found this shell in amongst the archaeology, except that when our bomb disposal bloke looked at it, he said that it wasn't a shell like this. It was, in fact, a pretend shell, which was all a bit of an anticlimax, wasn't it?
No, I think it's fantastic. We thought we'd find lots of these, the live ones, but this is really rare. It's a practice shell.
Why do you need to practice putting a big bullet in a big gun?
Well, if it was just one person working, not a problem. But if you've got 8 of you, you've got one guy opening the breech, another man putting the shell in, then the breech is closed. On the right-hand side, you've got men operating elevation and traverse, and the others running up 1 every 4 seconds with a new shell to fire.
I think it was our Stuart who said that when you fire one of these things, it can bring down an aircraft thousands of feet away. Yeah. How does it manage to hit the aircraft so accurately?
It doesn't. What it actually has is a timer set into the fuse at that end, and that's set electronically, and that predetermines when it'll explode. You don't actually try and make a hole in the aeroplane and then go off bang. It goes off near the aeroplane, underneath it, above it, and it's the fragments that then do the damage.
Once the war finished, there was a concerted effort to defuse and remove all the shells from the island. But even now they do surface.
Stuart, so this is the offending 88 that we've got to get rid of?
It is indeed, Phil.
We found one of our own yesterday, and apparently the best way to dispose of it is to blow it up.
It's just not worth trying to open it up manually to try and preserve it. You're placing yourself at great risk doing that. The best thing to do is we'll put a little charge on this item, and then we're going to proceed down the beach, dig a hole.
Ah, that's where I come in. I wonder why I was invited, and I wonder why I was given a shovel. I know now.
While Phil gets used to the idea of burying something as opposed to digging it up, Matt's now got to the bottom of his bunker. It's obvious it started off as an ammunition store for the 88mm gun Rakshaw's digging.
They've been really shifting some heavy stuff around. The scratches going down there and down there.
Ammunition boxes, things like that, perhaps?
Yeah, I guess so.
But the defences thrown up around it suggest that it changed use as the war progressed.
Firing! 1, 2, 3!
That's amazing.
Well, it was a complete success because of your digging.
It was, absolutely, absolutely.
So with our shells successfully disposed of, we can now concentrate on working out what we've actually uncovered on site. And it's clear that by the end of the war, the Germans had built a sophisticated complex of trenches against ground attack.
Just can't believe how big this thing is.
Meanwhile, Raksha and Phil, fresh from the beach, have revealed an 88mm emplacement as robust as any Roman archaeology we've ever uncovered.
We got that little bunker area over there. We can actually see now where all the timber revetment is. But the main thing is, this is a seriously big piece of engineering for a seriously big gun.
So we've got a fortified enclosure as sophisticated as any Iron Age hill fort, with 6 massive guns capable of throwing up a barrage of exploding shells, while 20mm gun emplacements dealt with lower flying aircraft. But by the end, it was a fortress where starving troops lived in fear of invasion, and the 88mm guns, including the one in Phil's trench, were now lowered to overlook the island below.
Well, basically, we've got a sort of what I like to think of as a cross between a Roman fort and a wooden box. The Roman fort bit is the bank that goes all the way around. That gives you your protection. The wooden box bit is the fact that all these edges would have been revetted with timber. And in fact, when you'd have come in here, you'd have seen wooden sides and wooden flooring, and in each corner you'd have had an ammunition box there and an ammunition box there and probably one over there. But the central part is really what strikes you. It is an enormous hole that is filled up with concrete.
Yeah, and right in the middle of it, there's the one thing that's missing, which is that enormous metal killing machine.
Absolutely. But you can just see the imprint of where it once stood. You've got these bolts here where it's actually been fixed to the concrete. And clearly at the end of the war, they cut them all off except one, and they lifted the gun away and thank God took it away.
Yeah, glad it's not here anymore.
Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world with more digs and greater access than ever before.
We're on this beautiful but extremely wild part of the Welsh coast to tackle a baffling archaeological mystery. We're going to try and uncover secrets which have remained hidden since the Dark Ages and beyond. There's only one problem. Our site is over there on that island. It's called Gateholm, and it's got to be one of the most dangerous and inaccessible places we've ever excavated.
Oh, what? That is stunning.
Oh, yes. It's lovely, isn't it?
Well, my heart's definitely beating faster. All in the name of archaeology.
I'm actually quite excited about this.
That is fantastic.
Incredibly, Gateholm seems to have been inhabited, although whether it was by Celts or Vikings or Druids, no one knows. Who would want to set up home over there? To get over there, we've got to use this zip wire. It could be the toughest time team we've ever attempted. Well, I'm still alive, but something tells me the original islanders must have had another way of getting home.
So well done.
Thank you. Well, it wasn't quite as scary as I thought it was going to be, but having said that, see that? It was quite an experience. Gateholm's so difficult to access, we've had to send in an advanced team of climbers to set up a 300-metre-long zip wire. Every archaeologist and every piece of kit will have to cross on this single line. It's a slow and hazardous process. Excavating this precipitous and exposed rock will be a serious challenge. Francis, you've already started digging.
Well, Tony, I can't wait for you all day. I mean, it's now, well, gone noon.
Yeah, on day one.
On day one.
And you've dug that much. I understand. Our schedule is completely shot, isn't it? It's taking forever to get everybody over.
Well, the thing is, Tony, I mean, there's an awful lot of archaeology here. We've just got to get going. I'm getting a tiny bit panicky about it.
Gateholm and its surroundings are owned and managed by the National Trust, though there's not a stately home in sight on this rugged stretch of coastline. The Trust have invited us here to the far west of Wales to help unlock Gateholm's secrets. Francis approves the position of the first two trenches, one just inside the entrance and the other at the centre of our Iron Age promontory fort. But Phil's made an important find and now thinks the site could have far earlier origins.
I've been doing a bit of field walking with one or two of them over there, and I can prove that people were living up here before the Iron Age. We've actually got some finds. Look what we got there. That is a pebble hammer. They're a bit dodgy to date, but there have been some that have turned up on Mesolithic sites. So we've got occupation here at least, let's say, 8,000 years. So let's not just assume that everything that John sees there is Iron Age.
This is very exciting, Phil.
It's
stunning.
I know, it's going back in my pocket.
Well, let's get cracking on these trenches.
2 trenches, then.
2 trenches, yes. Yep.
You can go away again now.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, we don't need you
anymore.
As day 1 draws to a close, the island team are heading for home and safety. You know, one thing I hadn't factored in was that it takes as long to get back as it does to go there. So we're actually losing time at the end of the day as well, aren't we?
Well, we are, Tony, but I'm actually very keen to see what Raksha's got with her.
I know she's got a really large red bag there. I can't believe that's completely full of finds. That's the scary bit, isn't it? Don't damage the finds. Hang on, I'll get Danny over. Danny! Danny. Have a look at this stuff.
Oh, wow, this is exciting.
Tell me about it.
This is like Christmas, isn't it?
I'm really, really excited about this, mainly because I think it might be imported.
Oh, yeah. It's certainly not prehistoric, is it?
No.
It's not prehistoric. It's not,
Is it?
No, not that colour. No. Well, that is a really nice bright orange colour, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's definitely not prehistoric.
Nope.
And at first glance, I mean, it'd be nice to get this cleaned up and washed, but it does look like it's Roman.
Yay!
Yeah.
This morning, we thought we had an early Christian settlement, but now it looks increasingly likely to be Romano-British. So we've had some fantastic finds today over there on the fort, and we've had some great finds that have really made Raksha's day over there on the island. The question is, are the 2 sites linked? Hopefully, we'll find out tomorrow. We're getting really stuck in at the fort. We're sure it's Iron Age, as much as 700 years or so before the Romans arrived. And signs of domestic life are now beginning to emerge.
What have you got here? That looks amazing.
I think a floor is about all you can say at the moment.
I
A
have to-
potential floor.
Well, I wasn't expecting to see anything quite that good, actually, to be honest with you, in here.
We've already exposed this much so far, but it definitely runs up to this stone and in that direction.
That's beautiful.
The fort's inhabitants built high banks to protect them from attack. But how effective were these defences in the event of an all-out assault?
Yeah, really, they're trying to channel people down one single route into a killing zone.
OK, so you've got all these invaders charging towards us.
Yep.
What exactly do we do?
Well, we get out our slings, we get a load of pebbles, and this is what we'd use at range. And when they can get closer, you can just use bigger ones and just hurl rocks at them.
Do you want an attack in force?
That would be great.
Come on, then. So are we going to use stones now?
No, I think we'll just go for a softer option.
Come back here and launch.
What I like so much about this demonstration is that we've got 2 innocent archaeologists in the foreground who are quite likely to receive collateral damage. But I guess that's just war, isn't it? Right, come on then, attack us.
Right, charge!
Hey! Whoa, not bad, not bad. Found it much more difficult to... Oh, got him! And we've got people chucking rocks as well.
I think this is a battle we might just be losing.
It's all right. We don't want your cattle. We don't want your horse.
Before I fall victim to further tribal assaults, I'm making a break for the island on the dreaded zip wire. It kind of doesn't feel quite so bad the second time, but then you get a bit overconfident and look down. Oh, I'm glad that harness is released from in there now. I can't quite walk properly. Your trench is cleaned up really nicely.
I know, I'm quite glad it rained last night. I could actually see something for once.
And what can you see?
I've actually got a wall line here.
Where's the wall line? Is it... Have you got one sort of across there like that, and then the other one's obviously there?
Yep, that's right. But do you remember last night when I bought you all that pottery?
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually standing inside the building, and this is where the pottery came from.
Well, that's strange, though, isn't it? Because if this is Roman, that doesn't really square with what Francis was saying yesterday. When he looked at the air pictures, he thought that this would probably be early Christian, a monastery or something.
But it still can be early Christian, though. What I'm wondering is whether they're actually imports, so they could have been traded into this island.
But if that's the case, it would be very early Christian, wouldn't it? Which would be really exciting.
Well, exactly.
We've got a trench open on either side. On the western side, there appears to be some sort of cell where Rakshas found Roman pottery. But on the eastern side, there's another small room where we've got prehistoric finds. What's even doubly curious is the fact that, according to earlier archaeologists, this was neither Roman nor prehistoric, but part of some early Christian monastic site. So what on earth's going on, do you think, Francis?
It's a bit confusing, Tony, but I think we're about to crack it. We are in another little room here, but we have a ditch. Now, this ditch that Ian is working in is absolutely fascinating, because I think it's probably Bronze or Iron Age, and it goes with the material that we were finding here yesterday, okay? Now, what's interesting about this ditch is that it's been filled in with large quantities of rock, deliberately filled in. Now, why do you fill in a feature like that? You don't do that if you're a farmer building, you know, a barn or something. This goes with something like either a Roman settlement or a monastic settlement where the land has to be prepared before other structures can be erected.
So, an early big ditch with a monastery on top of it, could it still be a sacred isle?
Yes, I think it could, Tony. I'd like to find some early Christian material to be sure of its date, but it's not impossible yet, you know. So we still could have a monastic settlement.
What about Trench 3?
Well, Trench 3 is all about the other important part of life in the hill fort, and that is the defences themselves. And what we've got here is a section through the bank of the ramparts. And you can actually see that right at the front end there, we've got some really, really big stones actually strengthening the front of the bank. And what we want to do is get through that, see whether we can see any finds underneath the bank that might tell us when this bank was put up.
Does that mean you haven't got any finds at all yet?
We've got a few scraps of flint, which probably relate to the Mesolithic people that were living here. We've had no bone, but that's not really surprising. The soil is so acidic, the bone wouldn't survive. Also, interestingly, it had no pottery. Now, the Iron Age people would probably have had no pots at all. So the sheer fact that we've had neither pot nor bone is significant. Tell me, what sort of pottery have you had on the island?
Roman.
Exactly. The Romans were on the island, but the Romans were not here. The people that were here were undoubtedly the people that were living here before the Romans came.
Cassie, I thought we were meant to have a road here. That looks like bedrock.
Well, it is bedrock. You're dead straight on this. But if you look up here, we've got some slightly more rounded stones on the top, and you know, it's just generally more warm, whereas down that end it's far more angular. It's where the foot traffic's been on the bedrock. They're using the bedrock as their metalled surface effectively.
I must admit, Cassie, it does look very much like a footpath. It is very much worn. I'll buy that, you know.
Excellent.
2,500 years ago, Cass's path, cut into the bedrock, would have led past a series of stone-faced banks, each topped off by a fence of woven hazel to a pair of high wooden gates. Nestled inside the fort would be at least half a dozen roundhouses. Quite a substantial and important settlement. And now for my final leap of faith. The last visit to Gateholm. We've got to get everything off the island as quickly as possible. And we just don't know whether we're going to get all the archaeology done in time, particularly as the weather forecast isn't all that great. Although, quite frankly, I'm a little less worried about that than I am about getting to the other side in one piece. You'd think it would get easier, wouldn't you? We're still trying to date the buildings on this intriguing isle. Was Gateholm once a sacred place? And can we prove a connection with the mainland settlement? We need some answers fast. Let's hope Matt's roundhouse is Iron Age. Matt, is this trench all wrapped up now?
Pretty much, yeah. We've nearly finished the recording, that's it.
Last time we were here, you'd only got this top bit, hadn't you?
Yeah, we extended out this way because we thought we might have the doorway. So we took it another, nearly a metre. You can see the curve of the wall coming round here, but there's no doorway.
So whatever it is circular?
It is definitely circular, yeah.
Francis, you put this trench in because you wanted to try and establish whether or not we'd got an Iron Age roundhouse. What can we say?
Well, it's certainly a roundhouse, Tony. Quite a substantial one with large turf-built walls. As for the dating, we don't have a lot of dating, but what we've got, I think, supports Iron Age. Yesterday we found part of an Iron Age quern or corn grinding stone, and that's the sort of thing you'd expect to find inside an Iron Age house.
If it is an Iron Age roundhouse, and you seem pretty convinced it is, then how do you think it relates to our Iron Age settlement over there?
Well, I think the people who were living here, Tony, were probably first or second cousins of the folk living over there.
Francis, when we first came here, you showed me this air picture, which apparently was of an early Christian monastic settlement, and we appear to have a little roadway here and lots of little monks' cells. Well, it's disappeared, isn't it?
We've just judged far too much off that aerial photograph. We've said, oh, buildings on a bit of rock sticking out into the sea, got to be monks. No, we're completely wrong.
So what have we got here?
Well, what we've got, Tony, is a substantial settlement. It runs right the length of the island, from over there to right down to the headland over there. There have been hundreds of people living here, and it was well laid out and well organised. As you've got that street there, I mean, this is a proper little settlement.
So we now know that Gateholm wasn't always an island, but was once a rocky promontory, a busy settlement for possibly thousands of years. In the Bronze Age, perhaps 4,000 years ago, there were half a dozen farms. By the time of the Iron Age, Francis believes there would have been 12 or more roundhouses. And finally, by Roman times, the island would have been covered with many more buildings. Well, like all the best sleuths, we've managed to solve the mystery at the end of the story. So shall we get off this island quickly before the rain starts again?
Hang on, aren't you staying to backfill?
What, the trench? No, we'll leave that to you. See you later.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
Orgueil, Jersey's oldest castle, sits high over Gorey Harbour, protected on three sides by the sea. Built on a steep granite bluff, it dominates not only the beaches of Western Jersey, but also the approach to the Channel Islands from France. Entering the castle, you pass through a formidable corridor of gates and courtyards, overlooked all the way by arrow slits, gun platforms and battlements. It was never supposed to be easy to get in. But it's the natural defence of the terrain that's really going to cause the team a few headaches.
I mean, that's a serious slope.
Yeah, that's slightly more vertical than I was expecting.
Is this the first time you guys have run this machine over this kind of undulating ground?
Undulating?
Take the slack. It's only 25,000 quid's worth of kit.
Has anybody done this before?
Not on a slope this steep. I don't think anybody's been so stupid.
But I think we've really surpassed ourselves getting you to geophys that slope.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scariest thing for me is seeing Jimmy in that harness. There's lots of health and safety issues. We need to do it properly.
Yeah.
So it's taking time. It's going to be a while before we get any results from that area.
So you've moved down here now?
Yeah, I mean, this is more my sort of territory, nice flat lawn.
And this is likely to be associated with the castle anyway, either in its earlier phases or perhaps ancillary buildings associated with it.
Yeah, but Mick, you're not a castle-y sort of bloke. I can't imagine that the reason that you want to come down here is simply because this is part of a castle.
No, I think there's a lot of possibilities that there's something earlier down here as well. Because if you mentally strip all that stone castle off the top there, you've got a promontory sticking out into the sea, which is likely to be the sort of thing that would be an Iron Age promontory, a prehistoric promontory, in which case through here you might have ditches and banks cutting off that promontory.
So we might get something that's even earlier than the castle itself?
I think it's highly likely, yeah.
So Trench 2 goes in on Castle Green to look for a ditch that could add to the known defences of the site. And being cut into granite, it should be easy to find.
Could be a ditch or something filled up with this crushed granite stuff.
It's quite a clear edge, actually.
If we're really lucky, it may even date back to the original castle built in the reign of King John. When do we first hear about there being a castle here?
Well, we first hear something in 1209, hints. We don't have mention of castle, but we've got this description from the pipe rolls, and it mentions the Isle of Jersey and deliveries to knights and 12 horse sergeants and 10 foot sergeants, and also the horses of these knights. So clearly there's fighting men here, there's a garrison, so we might assume that there's a castle. We don't know definitely until 1212. Now this is a letter from King John where he mentions the Isle of Jersey, Insula de Jersey there, cum Castro, with its castle. So that's when we definitely know there's something here.
But finding evidence of that original stone castle under the massive 16th century walls is proving difficult. Undeterred, Stuart's hunting high and low and may have found something out on the northeast corner.
This join here looks odd, doesn't it? This junction here. These are part of the Tudor battery on the corner, isn't it? We know the date for that. But that's built over that wall there.
We've got a wonderful junction here where the Tudor bastion comes up against a curving wall that must be of earlier date, that itself is built against the rock face.
Curving wall suggests tower to me. Is that what you
Tower?
think?
13th or 14th century, part of the arrangement of the curtain wall with round towers on it, as we had before the Tudors.
Is this the first time you've seen it this morning?
First time this morning, yes, when the ivy was stripped away. We've found something that has never been drawn on any plan or described before.
Wow.
So we've now located an original 13th century corner tower underneath the 16th century defences. But round the corner, Phil's struggling to take Trench 1 anywhere near as far back in time. Oh, quite a challenge getting up here. Phil, what was the purpose of this trench?
To see whether we could establish the date of this wall.
And have you done it?
Not yet. What we have found is that we've got the outside edge of it plummeting away there, and then across here we've got the main core of the wall. What we'd like is for this wall to go underneath and be earlier than the main Tudor bastion wall.
So at the moment you've got absolutely no dating evidence?
Not really, not for the wall, but what we do have is rather unexpected dating. It's this water pipe, or this pipe that's running through here, which we think is probably a relic of the German occupation.
Why do you think it's German?
Well, apparently everybody that digs around the castle says the one thing that you always find is relics left over from the German occupation. It seems that's the best bet for that.
So you've got some pretty robust dating for the 1940s. Now you've just got to get back to the 1300s.
Yeah, and I mean, there are two ways that we're actually going to try and approach that. Firstly, see if we can establish whether this wall goes underneath the buttress, and the second way is actually to look at the mortars.
What would be significant about the mortar?
Well, according to Warwick, the 13th century mortars tend to have quite a lot of shell in them, whereas the Tudor mortars they're a lot more gritty. But he also tells me that there are miscellaneous mortars, and we just got to hope that we haven't got one of them.
No sign of the 13th century down in Trench 2 either. The rock-cut ditch is deeper and wider than anyone expected, but it's producing little to help us date it. Although this might not be the only ditch down here, Stuart thinks he's stumbled upon another one near the castle gate. And after clearing the brambles, he calls in Jimmy with his radar for confirmation. If he's right, this is yet another unknown defensive circuit around the castle.
If you follow the contour around it, you can see there's actually a ditch comes round here, and it heads down towards where the drawbridge for the original medieval castle gate was. Right. So really, this ditch ought to be part of that original 13th century castle defences.
So Trench 3 goes in to see if there is a second ditch cut below the western wall. If Stuart's right, it should run tightly butted up against the lower slopes of the castle, parallel to John's Ditch. But the question remains, where's the wall that should go with it? Stuart has a hunch and is about to boldly go where no landscape investigator has gone before. With a beady eye, he's clocked something 30 feet up.
Can you see how the masonry is different to the battery above it?
Encouraged by the daredevil antics of the rest of the team,
good luck, Stewie.
he heads off up the rock face. Confused by such an up and down archaeological site, I catch up with Mick to get my head around what's going on. So Phil's looking for a 13th century wall up there.
Yeah.
Down there we've been digging for some ditch.
Yeah.
But suddenly I find that you've opened another trench here.
Yeah, well, there's another ditch, you see, coming through here by the earthworks, so we want to know the date of that one as well.
It's hard for me to concentrate solely on Mick because while he's digging down into the ditches, Stuart perversely is swinging in the air about 30 feet above our head. Stuart!
Hello!
What you doing up there?
Having a look at this masonry here. You see this block here? Can you see there's a band of masonry going that way?
Yeah.
This is very different to the stuff that's on top of it, and it goes in a curve. This is earlier than that. That's Tudor, so this has got to be earlier, and it looks like it's the corner of a round tower.
Could that be the 13th century wall that we're looking for?
It looks very probable.
Stuart's now confident he's located a bit of 13th century castle high up, wedged under the corner of the 16th century walls. So he's back up his rope, recording the archaeology with a little eagle-eyed help.
Stuart.
Yeah, I can hear you, Stuart.
I found some new wall up here, Henry, which is really, really nice. It's a curving bit of wall going round this crag. And it's got mortar in it. With the crushed burnt limpets in it that Warwick was saying are likely to mean it's 13th century. If I give you a couple of positions, can you plot them for me? First one now, where I am.
Observation stored.
Right, I got that, Stuart. Where my left glove is now, Henry.
Observation stored.
Encouraged by this medieval discovery, Stuart follows the base of the vast 16th century wall in the quest for more.
We're walking on a wall of ivy at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah, so follow behind me, and if we have to go on our bums to scale across, then no problem.
Okay.
Now, there's a few stingers just down here.
Okay.
Bingo! Concealed under the ivy is a second tower.
This is really good.
So in addition to the northwest corner tower, we can add a second 13th century tower just along the western wall. Everything we're finding on this site is geared to war and defence, suggesting that this castle has seen some serious action.
Henry, I wonder if you'd do a bit of modelling for me.
Right.
not in that way.
Stuart thinks he's located a defensive earthwork down below the corner of the 16th century Grand Battery.
If you look at this.
A large pointed platform seems to sit on top of the rock-cut ditch, jutting out into Castle Green.
And you've got this big flat sort of earthwork that comes and lies on the slope. Well, to me, that looks like it's an outwork or a bastion, some form of defence covering this sort of weak area out here.
There's sort of that sense of a triangle, isn't there? Which is
Yeah,
that would be right.
Well, what would be really good if you could model that. And see how it fits in with all the line defences and the topography, see whether it is a defence work.
Under orders, Henry gets cracking. But he's not the only one surveying the castle. We've got a very flashy piece of kit on site this week. Ben, all our techie people are really excited about what you're doing. What exactly is it?
This is a 3D laser scanner, and we're actually using it to digitally document the castle at the moment.
How does it work?
Well, what it does, it fires out a laser beam, and any surface that it hits, it calculates a three-dimensional point in space. And it does this thousands of times a second, creating a rich point cloud of data, which is an exact sort of replica of the castle.
Why do we need a 3D model of the castle? Look, I've got eyes here, I can see the castle. I've got a camera here, that can see the castle as well. Why do we need you?
We can use it to create very accurate measurements at any point within the castle, So if we scan the exterior walls and then we go inside and scan the internal rooms, we can then create measurements throughout the building.
So you can actually take slices, as it were, out of the castle?
We can, yeah. Once we've scanned the whole thing, we can literally slice through at any point, horizontally or vertical, and create sections throughout.
Trench 3 has now bottomed out and has thrown up some useful pottery.
What date do you reckon that is?
15th century.
Oh, right, at the bottom.
Yeah, right at the base.
Right, well, I was just expecting it to be sort of 13th century or something like that.
Well, we thought medieval, so it's later medieval, but
Right.
unless it's been washed down and it's cleared out, but from the evidence it looks like it's 15th century.
Phil, have you managed to solve the problem for us?
We have solved the problem, Tony, and we've always known that this wall went round and actually butted onto the bedrock on that side. Well, we've dug into here and we can show that this wall butts directly up against the natural. So this is a totally freestanding tower, and we reckon that it's exactly like one of those over there. I've talked to Warwick about it. We know it's not 13th century. We've seen the mortars. It's not the Shelley mortars. It's mortar with shells in it. It's probably 15th century, and it's almost certainly part of that defence over there.
What was it for?
What this tower is doing is covering this lower ground in here. You've got people up in here, defenders with guns and bows and arrows. It's literally like a big pillbox that is designed to keep people off those lower slopes.
And this is new stuff. No one knew about this
This
before.
is crucially new stuff to the whole development of the castle.
Helen, big structure up here. Looks like it's defensive. 15th century. How does that tie in with the history?
Pretty well, really, particularly if it's connected with that tower, which was built by Richard Harleston, who arrives at the castle at a really peculiar moment. During the Wars of the Roses, somehow the French have got hold of the castle, and Harleston is sent to relieve it for the English.
Hang on, so that's the Brits sieging their own castle?
Yeah, absolutely. I know, it's kind of backwards, isn't it? But anyway, the French get driven out, and Harleston sets about updating the castle. Now, this tower here, you can see it's got the arrow slits, but just peeking through the trees is what looks like a window. Now, that is a gun port for the modern artillery. Now, this tower also looks like it was built for artillery, so they're part of the same defensive system.
That does make sense, doesn't it? You'd have a tower there guarding the front entrance and one here checking out the rear.
Absolutely. It all ties together.
These new defences, along with those of the 16th century refortification, show that the castle was under constant threat. And Stuart believes Orgueil's defensive evolution mirrored developments in weapons technology. So he's mapping known medieval firepower against the castle's walls.
Their effective range from the arrows is about 100 yards.
I can just sort out 100 yards.
Just marking out this distance of death is chilling.
I'd never think I could be killed by an arrow or a crossbow from that distance. By the time you get to the 15th century and starting to use muskets, you've got a different order of beast to deal with. You've got these musket balls which are coming at you. Their penetrating power is such that if you're at this distance, the ball wouldn't just kill you, it'd go straight through you.
Oh.
Out the other side and take 2 or 3 people out the other side. There'll be chunks of meat flying everywhere. People are killed by splinters of bone behind the person that's been hit first. By the Tudor period, when you're getting the cannon coming in, suddenly they're gonna do you a lot of damage at 2,500 yards.
And this firepower could be aided by geography.
Looking at the levels, the top of that's lower than the top of the hill here. So I think the natural hill is probably better as defensive position than the top of the castle.
How far away is that?
The crest of the hill here is about 300 yards.
If you're on top of that hill and you've got cannon, you can pound the castle quite easily. This would be a horrible place to be, wouldn't it? Shall we move?
We've now established there's no ditch in Trench 4, but as it turns out, Castle Green still did its bit for the war effort.
Although we haven't found the big ditch that we were looking for in here, what we have got is an OGS, or old ground surface, with early medieval pottery. But at this end, we've got this great big feature here. We've only got one side of it. Now, we think it's a quarry pit, And they're removing all the loose loess, the natural wind-blown sand and things in here, and they're mixing it up with stone to make a kind of mushy paste almost with big bits of stone in, and they're using that for the wall core. And in the time of about the 1470 rebuilds of the castle.
I haven't heard the word prehistoric mentioned once.
No, neither is there in that trench over there, where we've got 14th century at the bottom, 15th century halfway up. There's nothing prehistoric down here at all.
But you got us all excited about the possibility of prehistory down here.
Oh, that's right, yes, and there's no evidence. I mean, there is prehistoric stuff on the top of the base of the castle. That's where the prehistoric site must be.
But how far back in time have we pushed this site? The answer lies in Trench 1. Where's Ian?
Ian, you got a visitor.
I said, where are you? They said, I think he's still in that trench up by the castle wall. We hadn't seen you for 2 days.
Yeah, well, I've been up here digging down all on my own, so.
What you got?
Well, we've got to the bottom of this medieval wall, and I've just got underneath the wall, down into these rocks and this old ground surface. I'm back into prehistory.
How do you know it's prehistory?
Because all the soil's absolutely full of Iron Age pot and prehistoric flint work.
You tried to insult me a couple of days ago by calling me Fred Flintstone, but I'm totally unrepentant. I still love flints. Look at how sharp that edge is across there. It actually goes in an arrow shaft like that. That arrowhead is probably about 3000 BC.
It's really satisfying, actually, that we've managed to nail the prehistoric part of the story to here, isn't it?
Absolutely, but I know you're not remotely interested in it. All you're interested in is the medieval stuff. And when I talked to you a couple of days ago and we talked about why we put this trench in here, I said we wanted to find out which of these two walls was the earlier and which was the later. And I said there was 2 ways that we could do that. One was by the stratigraphy and one might be by the mortar. And the stratigraphy we can show with this one is that this low wall here is the earlier one, and it is earlier than the big Tudor wall back there.
And it's 13th century?
Ah! Now I can't tell you the date of it because the mortar was going to be the crucial dating thing. We do not have the Shelley mortar in here. So I cannot say without doubt that this is 13th century, but it could be. It is definitely earlier than that wall.
At the 11th hour, Jimmy has made a remarkable discovery. His radar has picked up a complete 13th century tower inside the later bastion. That ends our investigation, and it's time to draw together what we've learned about the earliest stone castle and its subsequent development.
What can we add to this now that we didn't know when we started?
We can confirm that there is a half-round tower. We've also found a completely unknown round tower.
A round tower there.
A 15th century battery down here. A solid half-round.
What about
bastion.
down on the slopes?
A half-round, a D-shaped
15th century.
14th, 13th century.
I think I'd better pull this together. Mont Orgueil has been in use since prehistory. The steep-sided granite hill has been recognised as a perfect defensive position for at least 5,000 years. The site was set in stone in the 13th century, when a fortified keep was built on the highest point. Protective curtain walls and towers surrounded it, high up on the crest of the hill and part-way down the slope. In the 15th century, the castle had a military makeover. 2 formidable ditches were cut in the rock below the hill, and a pair of gun towers were added to protect the gateway and cover the approach to Castle Green. The late 16th century heralded the most substantial changes. Towers and walls from the earliest castle were knocked down or buried under a monstrous gun battery, and a lofty D-shaped tower designed to protect the heart of the castle. The arrowhead bastion at ground level was the cherry on the cake, leaving Mont Orgueil groaning under the weight of guns. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.